What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mission Accomplished. My name is Michelle.
I'm Garrett. And guess what? Because of popular demand, we've got another spooky episode. Cue the pumpkins. Cue the bats. Okay. Again, the sound effects will be handled in post-production.
But I'm fun when I do them.
Mm-hmm. They're great sound effects.
Yes. Guys, you, in case you missed it, last week's episode was all about paranormal experiences that we cannot disprove that have happened.
Go surreal, I guess.
Yes, we are back with another spooky episode, guys. Another true story spooky episode, because the more we thought about it, the more we realized a lot of weird things have happened to us. And we're really excited to hear what you guys think. If this is your first time on the podcast, we're so excited to have you. If you've been with us the whole time, thank you so much. I believe this is our 20th episode.
Episode number 20.
Super crazy. Huge milestone.
We're going to jump right into it.
Yes.
I'm going to preface this story with a disclaimer. Not a disclaimer.
Oh my God.
No, I think this is necessary. You told me this was necessary.
Oh, this disclaimer. Yes. Oh my God. This is really, okay, to clarify, this isn't a disclaimer of like, oh, some parts of the story, like whatever, are weird or don't have evidence or something like that. No, this is like a real ass disclaimer, guys. Like, this is the real deal. Go. Disclaimer.
So, if I die.
Oh my God.
Or end up dead in the next week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, a year, you'll know why, and it's because I told this story.
Oh my God.
And if I do die, Michelle has the real contact information for the person who probably killed me.
Oh my God.
And I've sent the contact information and real name of this individual to 5 other people. So if I'm gone in the next month, you know who killed me, and please finally arrest this human being for their crimes. So as you see from the title of the episode, my landlord was a serial killer. Or at least I suspect them to be a serial killer. And if they are, and I do die, we figured it out. He was. And now we can move on with our lives knowing that for a fact. I'll be dead.
Please don't die.
I think I'll be fine. So I'm going to tell this story.
No, I don't want you to die.
I'm going to tell this story.
But like,
and
do you actually think he's coming after you?
I don't know. I'm going to tell this story, and I experienced it with my roommate at the time, Kevin, and he also said he feels comfortable for me telling this story.
You guys had a phone call this morning about this.
We did, because I wanted to make sure that he felt safe that I talked about this story. And again, this is less like, I don't have hard factual proof about any of this. It's just like I have a lot of weird things that occurred that like lead me to believe that they might be a serial killer. Anyway, I read your comments in the last one. I took notes of my story this time so I don't stumble around the story like an idiot. I know.
Well, we'll see.
I still will have trouble, I'm sure. So the big thing to note about this story is I will be changing some details of the story.
But like non-important details.
Non-important details. Like I'm not going to change
order of events
or big things around. I'm going to be changing names. I might be changing genders. I might be changing locations. Just little tiny things, just so the story isn't, I don't know. I don't want to die, so I'm just changing some things up. I think it's going to be pretty obvious if this person ends up watching the episode, though. Okay. Here we go, guys. This is the story of why I think my former landlord was a serial killer. Where do we start? All right, so Kevin and I... Oh, also, Michelle, you've heard... But before, what are your thoughts on this human? Because you've met this human being before. Do you think they're a serial killer?
It's weird.
You don't have to say yes just to like play it up. Like
okay.
he's definitely a. Go ahead.
This person is definitely weird, and like we know a lot of weird people. But this is like definitely different kind of weird. The vibes are strange. It's I don't even know how to explain it. And then we were not together yet when you lived in this location, but I did spend a lot of time hanging out in that apartment with you and Kevin. And anytime I even had a brief encounter with this landlord, it just left you feeling really bizarre inside. Like, and the things you guys would tell us, and you did collect, like you guys had some weird stuff that you heard and found and discovered and shared with me. And I was even like, I think you guys need to move. I think you need to get out of there. There were several times I tried to convince you guys to move.
Yes. Well, a lot of it was budgetary reasons.
Yeah, you did have a great deal on that apartment.
Yeah, as long as your landlord is a murderer, you can get a pretty cheap deal with a living space. So let's just jump into it. Kevin and I, we're roommates. We are in a city. I won't say what city. We're living in a city together. And we had a hard time finding housing. All right. And out of nowhere, we get we get a call from somebody, an individual. His name was Ted, and said, "Hey, I'm aware, like, I heard you're looking for housing. I saw on Facebook that you're interested in moving somewhere. I have a connection." Ted's like, "I have a connection with somebody and I can get you in a place."
No,
really
back
cheap.
up. How did you know Ted on Facebook
I don't know Ted. I don't know who Ted is.
So Kevin knew Ted.
Kevin did not know Ted. Kevin had... Exactly. So they were...
What?
It was like a friend of a friend of a friend.
So like y'all posted you're looking for housing.
Yes.
And this person who you're not even friends with on Facebook probably sees the post on...
It was a post. Somebody tagged
page.
somebody else, and then and so a friend of a friend of a friend
Copy that.
is Ted, and Ted goes, "I got to hook up." So I just want to say Ted is maybe like late 40s, not late 50s, really late. Anywhere between 40 and 50 something. Okay, anywhere in there. White male, like, fits the bill of a serial killer, and it like checks all those boxes.
Well, I wouldn't say that. That's a little stereotypy.
I don't.
But you get the vibe.
No, like, statistically speaking, serial killers are white men.
Okay. He's weird, guys. He's weird.
Okay, so we meet Ted in person, and he's like, "Here's a situation. So this is Ted speaking. Ted's like, "I live in a really interesting place. It is a mansion, and I don't own the mansion." And we're like, "Okay." So there is this old woman. I'm going to refer to her in this story as Old Sally. Okay, I changed the name.
That sounds way creepier than her actual name, but this is fine.
Okay, so Old Sally, who is a deranged, like, senile old woman, can barely string a sentence together. Like, she's definitely losing her mind. Like, we've met her multiple times. She, like, rocks back and forth and can barely form a thought. Old Sally owns a mansion, and Ted is the building manager for Old Sally. Okay?
For the mansion.
The mansion is interesting because there are, like, rooms in this mansion that are renovated to, like, as isolated rooms, right?
As isolated living spaces.
Exactly. So we would have our own entrance, blah, blah, blah. Ted has his own room.
Elaborate a bit more. So you have your own, you have your own entrance, you have your own kitchen,
here's what it is.
living room.
The setup is it's like one room that is your living room and kitchen. It is both. Then it had 2 bedrooms with 1 entrance leading up to that.
Yes.
Now, in this area of the mansion, you go up the stairs and you have our space, or the room that's being offered to Kevin and I. And then down the hall from that, you have Ted's space. Okay.
They're like little apartments.
Yeah, they're like little mini apartments within the mansion that are like cut off from the rest of the mansion.
Yes.
Right. So
conceptually sounds really cool.
So old Sally's like, hey, I have the other half of my mansion available. And Ted is like doing work on the home for me. Basically, Ted owns 1 room and we're going to take the other. And we're like, okay, great. And the rent was really cheap for the city that it was. We're like,
very cheap.
Very cheap. And then Ted's like, it's all going to be under the table. Right. And then he said, but
so by that, you mean no lease.
So there was no lease. Because
no mailbox.
We didn't have a mailbox because Ted said this all had to be
untraceable.
Untraceable and off the radar was his words. He didn't want anyone being able to know where this location was or that either of us lived here. It was like no one,
on permanent record.
It was like, you can't have mail sent here. You need it sent to a P.O. box. On your driver's license, you can never put this address there. It was essentially like we didn't exist here. Ted didn't want anyone to know on paper that anyone lived in this home other than old Sally. We're like, okay, fine. It's cheap. It's a city that rent is high.
Cheap.
Very cheap. And we're like, yeah, we'll take it. This is great.
To give an example, you guys were paying probably 60% of what I was paying in a similar situation on an actual lease in an apartment.
Sure. Yeah. I'd say that's, 60%.
Maybe 70.
70 sounds accurate. Yeah. Around there. It was cheaper. And, Kevin and I, who were just...
And y'all had a lot of other things included too, right? Like...
electricity, not really, because there's no lease. So anytime we would like do too much of something, like the energy bill was high or the water bill was high, Ted would come to us and be like, we need more money to cover the costs. And there's no lease. And it was really like, we didn't know how to handle it ever. Anyway, I want to get to the spooky parts.
Yeah.
So Ted's profession, he is a photographer. He is the artsy type. But Ted is like the dark artsy type. A little moody, little emo. There's like, he likes the vibe of like Panic at the Disco. Not as a musical choice, but as like a vibe. You know what I mean? A little bit dark.
But Panic at the Disco?
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, when I see Ted, I don't think Brandon Urie Panic at the Disco.
Sorry. I guess that
all.
I guess that was a bad example. I guess I meant
Panic at the Disco. Yeah, sure, it's emo, but it's also pop. Like,
okay,
it's pop
sorry.
emo.
Let me give you.
You're thinking more like
Marilyn Manson.
Okay. You're thinking more like Evanescence.
He's into like gothic horror and stuff.
Okay, yeah, that's
Panic was a bad example.
Yes.
Moving on. So he's a photographer, and he. Oh my God, this is such a bizarre thing. Okay.
We barely hit the tip of the iceberg with this. This is so weird.
So we move in, and things are fine. Like, we got a P.O. box. We're living under the radar. No one knows we live there.
That P.O. box guy, that was a pain in the ass.
That's for another day.
Okay, whatever.
And everything was going fine. And every once in a while, there'd be some things that would go wrong, and we'd need them fixed. And, we would try to work it out with Ted. Something we noticed is that, so Ted's a photographer by trade, and Ted would often have, his apartment was a photography studio. He converted it into a studio. Now, we have never seen it before because we weren't allowed in Ted's room. We weren't allowed to even see through Ted's door. If Ted ever came out of his room, the door would open and close in an instant, and he would come down the hall. Always in a hurry to go somewhere. His mind always churning. Very strange.
Yeah, whenever I saw him, it felt like his mind was in like 70 other places.
Yeah, focusing on something else. Always high, like high stress on something.
Yeah.
So Ted
Lots
would
of
have
anxiety.
his subjects over. So if he was taking headshots of somebody, he would invite them over to the apartment. Generally, that meant like females between the ages of like 25 and 30. So they would show up to the apartment, come up the stairs, pass our apartment, and we'd see them come in. Kevin and I saw them with our own eyes. We'll continue down the hall and then enter Ted's apartment, right? Later that night, Kevin and I, and this happened a few times, Kevin and I the walls are very thin at this apartment, and we were able to hear some like sexy time happening.
What?
Yeah.
I never heard this.
Yeah, this is where it started, the whole thing. So we would hear sexy time. We would hear moaning.
Oh my God.
And we'd definitely hear the bed like
squeaking.
It was not squeaking. It was more like the headboard would bounce against the wall a little bit.
And it was...
Well, because that wall was directly where our kitchen was. So, yeah, we heard that.
And it was Ted.
Oh, yeah. Because the other inhabitants of this mansion were pushed, like, to the other side of the house. So, like, we weren't anywhere near them. The only wall we have a connection with is Ted's apartment. So we'd hear the bed moving. And then later into the evening, those moaning, sexy time noises would kind of shift into, like...
Oh my God.
loud thumps and a little bit of like muffled screaming, and we always assume
Muffled screaming?
Yeah. And Kevin
and you don't
and
think it's BDSM-y?
That's what we thought. So Kevin and I thought, oh, Ted's just into some like that kind of stuff. That's just how Ted is. And we're like, that fits. That's fine. Like Ted, great. Okay. Not gonna judge. Ted's into that. That's all we thought of that. So the first thing that went wrong in our apartment is that every few weeks, an awful, putrid stench would come through the vents and into our space. And Kevin and I were like, what is that smell? And at first we're like, oh, maybe like a rat is in the wall or in the vents and died, and that smell is being carried in through the vents by the AC. And so
But then would it go away?
It existed so every few weeks it would appear, and then it would take a couple days to go away. And man, did it smell like.
So you thought it was...
I thought we were dead animal.
Dead animal.
Yes.
And not like shit.
It was definitely not poop.
Okay.
It like you know the smell of like decomposing like organic material. It smells differently than
not really,
poop.
but sure.
So we kept smelling it, and we're like, that's bad. We texted Ted. We're like, hey Ted, we have an awful smell in our apartment. Can you do something to help us? And Ted would show up and be like, oh, it's probably just the filters. We're like, okay, we swap the filters out. It's like, oh, it's probably this. And we're like, okay. And we would try all the things he would say. Nothing ever fixed it. He's like, well, I don't know what it is. There's nothing in the vents. And we just like write it off. Like, sorry, nothing we can do. That's just how it is.
Okay, so what happened to the smell?
Okay. So Ted originally said that we were allowed to text him, and that's how we would communicate. And then all of a sudden, Ted, after we like bothered him about the smell too many times, Ted said, by the way, absolutely no more correspondence by text messages. I will only be corresponding via email from now on. And then never texted us back again. So like just hard shut down our line of communication minus emails. We're like, okay. Oh, this is, I don't know if you know this part. This part's really funny. So 2 days later, Kevin and I are like walking up to our apartment. We passed Ted on the stairs, and Ted was like seemingly in a good mood. Cause like Ted's interesting. Ted is like a little, like he has some charisma to him, which also fits the whole serial killer thing.
He got ladies.
Many times coerced them into his apartment. But upon passing us, he says, oh, by the way, if you text me again, I'm going to kill you. And then laughs it off and then continues walking. And Kevin and I were like, That's a weird thing
What
to say.
the
Like
heck?
that comes. He literally said, "If you text me again, I'm gonna kill
my
you,"
God.
and laughs it off and keeps walking. And Kevin and we were like, "Well, that was out of all the things to choose to say, that was just."
And to
odd.
clarify, the smell has not been fixed yet.
No. Every few weeks it comes back.
So it didn't get fixed.
No.
He won't let you text you and then says, if you text me again, I'm going to kill you.
Yes.
So tell me what do you guys think is happening at this point? Because when I hear you tell this story, so far in my head, I'm thinking, okay, he and a woman had sex, he killed her, and her body is in his apartment.
Right. That's what we're
rotting.
thinking, because as time went on, the women coming into the apartment started to align itself with the smells, because it was every few weeks, and then it was a few days after the smells would start. So that's when we were like, okay, are those correlated? We're definitely possibly witnesses to murder. And here's what's really weird, and this is what freaks most people out when I tell this story.
Oh my God.
We would have guests over. Well, first of all, Ted said, like, we're not allowed to have people over. Like, he didn't want people knowing where this home was. He didn't want people over in general. We still had people over because we're like...
Under the guise of, if people find out that you're here not on a lease,
Sure, yeah, exactly.
it's super illegal
Exactly.
for him.
So we had people over anyway. And every once in a while, they'd come up into the home, into our apartment. We'd hang out, and they'd leave. On 2 occasions. And I'm not going to say their names because I'll protect them as well. You know both of them. On 2 occasions, 2 people who were in our apartment for a period of time were contacted by Ted over the internet and invited into his apartment for headshots. They'd never crossed paths. Which leads me to believe that there are some sort of Ted knows who is coming and going into our apartment. Ted is keeping track of either if it's through cameras or otherwise.
But like, even if he saw these people coming in and out,
he would
how
know
would
their
he
name,
find their names?
Right? That's what freaks me out. But 2 people, again, I'll tell you after this because I know
Okay.
you know one of them very well. 2 people were contacted after the fact and to come and get headshots done in his
Were they
apartment.
both women?
Yes.
Let me ask you this. When you saw women entering the apartment, did you ever see them exit?
Not once. And that is what is...
That could be coincidence.
Now, that could be coincidence,
That could
which
be
is why I didn't want to bring it
coincidence.
up. We saw them come in. We never saw them leave. And yes, it could be absolutely coincidence. They could have left late at night when we weren't there. Who knows? Maybe early in the morning. But we have only seen a few. I've only personally seen 2 of them come into the home and none leave. But again, coincidence.
Okay, my next question is, why didn't you call the authorities at any point?
Because we were getting really cheap rent.
That is not how you should respond to that question of people potentially getting murdered.
We had no actual substantial evidence to go off of other than like us psyching ourselves up and being like, oh yeah, our landlord is a serial killer. Like if we told the police that, they'd be like, you guys are ridiculous. Like we have no hard proof of anything.
And like, because you were talking earlier about like the sex stuff, the screams muffled could have been
him watching TV.
sexual.
Could have been a sex thing. So many different versions of it would make more sense than serial killer. Right?
Okay.
It just felt silly to be
keep
like,
going.
yeah. So,
and also, there's that weird time between where if the authorities come and they do nothing and they don't catch him, now you're implicated.
Exactly. Now, and we're the only ones who would know about this. So, but all of those details, plus how secretive we have to be about living here, all kind of added up to be this like weird, what's going on?
We're going to briefly interrupt this story because we had a discussion on the podcast where we learned that we are not changing our underwear enough. Apparently, you are supposed to change your underwear every 6 months, guys. And by change, I mean buy new ones and get rid of the old ones. And so we are so grateful to MeUndies for sponsoring this little segment of the podcast. MeUndies believes that comfort is about more than what's touching your skin. It's about feeling comfortable in your skin. You are a total badass, and what you wear should accentuate that fact. That's why MeUndies not only uses sustainable, breathable, soft as heck fabric, I'm telling y'all, it is so comfortable, but they also give you endless styles to choose from, total comfort inside and out.
I am wearing their lounge pants
So comfortable.
right now.
So comfortable,
They
guys.
are so comfortable.
Yes, the lounge pants are definitely my favorite. They offer classic colors to ridiculous prints.
In the spirit of Spooktober, they gave me spooky skeleton boxer briefs.
Yeah.
Okay. Also,
And your ass looks really good in them.
thank you. Also, I want to say I don't actually like boxer briefs ever because it's just too like. I want to feel free.
I don't know anything about men's underwear.
However, these were the first pair of boxer briefs that I've worn in years that I've enjoyed. So,
love.
yeah.
They offer size ranges from extra small to 4XL. So MeUndies also has a really awesome membership program, so you can get a new pair of undies or socks every single month to give that drawer a little refresh. Members get discounted pricing on everything MeUndies makes, as well as early access to major print launches. We got a deal for y'all. For any first-time purchasers, you can get 15% off and free shipping. MeUndies also has their problem-free philosophy. If you're not satisfied with any product for any reason, you can refund or exchange. No caveats, no questions. Okay, so to get 15% off your first order and free shipping, go to MeUndies.com/mission accomplished. That's MeUndies.com/mission accomplished.
The next incident, we hear an argument through the walls, and it's between Ted and an old woman.
Old Sally?
Old Sally. And we thought Old Sally, remember we talked about Old Sally as this like senile woman who could barely string sentences together. She rocks back and forth. She can't really communicate. She seems like she's not all there.
Right. And to clarify, reminder, Old Sally is the owner of the mansion.
She owns the mansion.
And lives there.
She is having an argument with Ted in Ted's apartment. So Kevin and I, obviously, we listen through the wall because why not? And as we get closer and we listen and we hear the muffled argument happening and they're getting heated, a few of the things that we hear is that Old Sally is not an old senile woman. She's all there.
Like completely coherent.
Completely coherent. She is all there. And she is yelling at Ted for not completing a job. We don't know what it is. She just kept referring to this as a job or the job. She never said what it was or any specific details. She just kept saying, "You didn't or you messed up the job. What are you going to do to fix this?" Is what she kept saying. And Ted's like, "Don't worry, I got it. I'll fix it. It's not a problem. I'm going to fly out next week." And they kept talking about flying to another state. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. What? Yeah, she was so angry at whatever it was that he did. To this point, Ted always joked around with us that like, oh yeah, she's an old woman. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, she's not all there. But in this conversation, she was 100% all there. And in fact, she is Ted's boss, you know, in a way. She's the landlord technically, and he's the building manager. She's all there. And that's when Kevin and I realized that whole old woman, like being old and senile, was all an act. You know, she's been acting in front of us this whole time, pretending like, oh, I don't hear what you're saying. Okay, sure, just nodding.
Do you actually think it's an act, or do you think it might be like sometimes she has episodes or dips in and out of it?
We've had about 4 or 5 conversations with her. She's always been like not really there. But when she had that conversation between the wall with Ted, it was like it was like another person. It was definitely her voice.
Are you positive it's her?
100% her. She has a very, very distinctive voice. Very distinctive.
So you think she was acting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like you would go on the record, like you would go to your deathbed saying she was acting in front of me.
Mm-hmm. I think it might have been, regardless of the whole serial killer thing is a thing, because I don't know how this relates to the serial killer. I'm just bringing up other odd things. I think there's a chance it's like tax evasion or just having a story for why she has people living there illegally. If someone found out, she could just play dumb. Oh, I'm old. I don't know what I'm doing. So I think the act is for that in case that happens. And she does it with everyone. But with Ted...
But she is old.
She's old, but like, I don't know.
That is crazy.
So
like if this old woman is conning people like that. Now, granted, if she owns a mansion and has weirdly renovated it so that each area is its own little apartment, and because multiple people lived there besides you guys and Ted.
Yeah. So here's another weird thing. It's old Sally lives there with her family.
Okay.
But old Sally's husband died a while back. I looked up records on try to find how he died. There was no mention of it. So her husband died, and the money was from his family originally. So he was a doctor. So all the money came from the husband's family. The husband's dead now. And now old Sally and her whole family live in this mansion together. I don't know if you want to connect the Tiger King dots with that, but like, just throwing that out there. Ted would be the guy to do it.
Oh my God.
I don't know. This is just me.
Oh my God.
This is just like us running wild with our imagination. So do I think Ted took out old Sally's husband? Yeah, sure. No, I don't know. I think the height of this happened when Kevin and I started getting really anxious about, we had to install something with the router for a project we were doing. Basically, we need access to the router in the home.
Okay,
right?
for the Wi-Fi.
For the Wi-Fi, the wireless router. And it was in Ted's apartment. And he was always like, oh, I'll hook it up for you. I'll do it. And we were like, no, we have to do it ourselves this time. And he's like...
Wasn't it like you were trying to upload some really big files for a specific work-related thing?
No, it was... we wanted to install our Philips Hue bulbs because we spent all these money on Philips Hue. And we had to connect it to the... not the router. It had to be connected to the modem. And directly. So...
You're referring to like the hub. The Philips Hue hub.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know... Philips Hue makes these light bulbs. This is not sponsored. They like change colors and you can do it all on your phone, and you can replace most of the lights in your own house so that it all runs through an app. But in order to do that, you have to have this physical device attached to the modem.
So I had all this money invested into these bulbs. I like smart home stuff. And I was like, Ted, we got to get to this thing. And he was so anti us ever touching anything near that. And we're like,
or going to his apartment.
He would not let us in his apartment. He was like, okay, fine. I'll let you in and install. You have like 5 minutes to do it. We're like, okay. So for the first time, Kevin and I walk down the hall and we're going to enter Ted's apartment. We've never seen it before. He opens the door. And this apartment is massive. Ours was like this tiny little box with like 2 bedrooms that are just big enough for a bed, and that's it. His apartment is like 3-4 times the size of ours. Like,
what?
So we figured that the mansion, we were on the 3rd floor.
Uh-huh.
His is the entire rest of the floor of the mansion. It was huge. And this is the weird part.
What?
When we walk in, here's how the house is decorated. It's all drywall, not painted. He had his own wall dividers up that he like installed himself.
Wall dividers?
Like he built his own drywall flats almost, like to like space the room out. And here's the weirdest part. There would be everything in his apartment was covered in gray tarps because he didn't want us seeing what his apartment looked like and what stuff was in his apartment.
He did that before you came over to hide his belongings.
I don't know. I'm sure it's not always like that. He definitely wasn't painting because nothing was painted. So we'd walk in the room and like there'd be a pile of stuff in the corner, tarp thrown over it, a pile over here, tarp over it. Just tarps on like these piles of things just randomly in the room. Not bodies. They would have been like, I don't know what it would have been, but like he just was covering.
Was he like a hoarder? You think?
No, because these
It
were
wasn't
very
hoarding behavior?
No, because hoarding is like you don't throw things away and your whole apartment stacks up with things. This was like minimalism with like, oh, there's a couple things over here with a tarp. Like he was very neat and organized other than that. And I mean like very neat and organized. And he'd have photos of like headshots of people. So my working theory, like I've seen Dexter, right? My theory is that his headshots are his trophies of all of his victims, right? Isn't that crazy? He's such a good storyline for... Anyway, we come in and he goes, let me show you where the modem is. He moves a wooden table with a tarp on it. Moves it across like a couple feet. He lifts up a rug.
Stop.
And mind you, we're on the 3rd floor.
Oh my God.
He opens a wooden hatch.
No fucking way.
In the floor. We look in. It is a straight shot tunnel that goes straight down to the 1st floor.
Oh.
A wooden ladder that goes all the way down and one single light bulb. And in the
What?
And in the middle is the modem.
What the fuck?
Yeah, because there
was a tunnel to the 1st floor?
There was a tunnel that went straight down to the 1st floor.
Now how big is this tunnel?
Enough for one person to fit through. And at the very bottom, there's a door that had a bunch of locks on it that led out to the 1st floor, but not the main entrance. So the way the mansion was built, there was a side door that had its own alleyway, and this door led to that alleyway, which would go out into the street, so that you could leave this area and not look like you're coming out of the mansion.
Why would there be a tunnel, though? Like, what's the practical architectural reason for that?
So I don't know why it was built. I know why, if I was a serial killer, why I'd want to have a tunnel. We called it the murder hole when we lived there.
Oh my God.
So Kevin climbs down.
I'm so uncomfortable.
So Kevin climbs down the murder hole.
Kevin?
Yep. Down the wooden ladder, and he starts hooking it up into the modem.
Why the fuck is the modem in the tunnel?
I don't know. It seemed like that's where it had to be wired for some reason. I think when they installed it originally, I'm not sure. I think because it had to be on the 2nd floor, and it was like the easiest way to have the wire come from the 2nd floor up to the 3rd. So I think it was convenience because the house is old. It wasn't outfitted with Ethernet and all that. So it was it definitely installed after the fact. Mm-hmm. So I think it was because it was the easiest thing to install. Easiest way for it to be installed. So Kevin hooks it up. We climb up. And as he's moving the table back over, now this is like too classic serial killer. He pulls the table back over the murder hole door. And in that, the tarp, like we can see what's on the table. And it is all like power tools and saws. And I mean like classic bone saw. Like literally a bone saw.
Oh.
Why does he have this? And like, what are you doing, man? Like, come on. Like, it's just too obvious.
Oh my God, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. I can't believe you lived there.
Yeah, so I will say he also did have a skull in his apartment, but that was because he did a Edgar Allan Poe themed photo shoot. So I'm assuming it was a part of that as a prop. But the tools, the power tools and saws were like...
And the tunnel.
It was like a little too obvious. Like, come on, man, hide your shit better. So I don't know. That was weird. And that was the time that we went to his apartment, to Ted's apartment. And it was weird because it wasn't decorated well, but it was clean and organized. And it was like,
sus.
You know what it
sus,
felt
sus,
like?
sus.
It felt like Matthew McConaughey's apartment in True Detective, which is at the beginning of the show. You're like, wait, could he be the murderer? Because it's like he's living with barely anything, but it's still neat and organized. It was like that. And again, fits the bill for serial killer. there was a few other. Okay, so that was like the big like, oh, this doesn't look good. This looks bad.
That's
so
terrifying.
our theory is he'd have women over, he'd kill them under the guise of I'm taking your headshot. He'd take their photo, has
Dispose
their
of stuff through the hole.
yes, packages them up, like does whatever he needs to do killing wise in the apartment, packages them up, takes them through the hole, through the tunnel, and access right out into the street into his car, right? So he didn't have to go through the hallway or anything. And then the smell would go through the vents while that's happening. We would smell it. Anytime we'd be aggressive about that, Ted would be like, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. I don't, it's just, that's just how it's going to be living here, That all makes sense to me. Very spooky. Very spooky.
I don't like any of it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. I'm scared.
Yeah. So I don't actually have any hard proof. Again, is this just us being like running wild with our imagination? Probably. Like, is he actually probably a serial killer? No. I hope not, because I hope all of those women are alive. I mean, the people that he invited that I know to the home didn't go.
But you know someone who did.
I know someone who did accept, but who is alive, although they weren't a woman. But my friend, one of my other friends, actually was invited to his home, to his apartment, Ted's apartment, before Ted didn't know that we were friends, me and this other guy. And through another means, he invited him to his apartment, had coffee with him. And even my friend was like, yeah, dude, his apartment was fucking weird. He had everything covered. It was like bizarre. The only thing, when my friend went to visit, the only thing that was uncovered was the couch. So they could sit and talk. And everything else was covered in the apartment. Like, that's odd behavior.
The wall dividers.
Yeah, I think it's because he like built a separate room for the murders. Because that room we could never see through. He basically added an extra room and added a door onto it. So it looks like that's where the death happens.
I'm speechless. I didn't know about a lot of what you just said in this story.
Another weird detail, which I don't know how it connects with the whole serial killer thing. Maybe it's just like a personality thing. Once Kevin and I came and we looked in the garbage cans because we had a shared garbage can with Ted, like outside, like street garbage. We opened it once and it was filled, and I mean filled, with dozens of ammo boxes for an AR-15. So, like, which means Ted, and we're the only people who use that garbage. Me, Kevin, and Ted. So that means Ted had, like, dozens of cartridges of AR-15 ammo. And, like, there's nothing wrong with, like, that doesn't mean you're a murderer if you have ammo for a gun. But in the state that this occurred in, like, the only way for you to get a gun is or an AR-15 is if you're grandfathered into it. So, like, he would either have to be grandfathered into owning that gun, or he has it illegally. Who knows? Just another weird detail. There's a dozen of those, like, little weird things that he does, but his mannerisms and the way he spoke and, like, looked at you and, like, but he was so creepy, yet he was still so charismatic, which is, like, something that serial killers often have.
Whenever I went over there, and sometimes there would be times I would run into him on the stairs or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was just always really scary, in the sense of, like, I was always worried I was going to get you and Kevin in trouble.
Oh, he is
just
like
by
intense.
existing.
If he's not in a good mood and he, like, looks at you and he's just like, never do that again, and then he'll leave. Like, he just gets so intense all of a sudden. It's almost like he breaks his character and, like, shows his true self for a moment.
Right.
It's weird, man.
I would always get so uncomfortable running into him. I felt like I had to, like, almost lie about what I was doing there.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get through the conversation. I'd be like, I'm just here dropping something off. Or I'm just here to do something. Once
there was a situation where we had people over and they forgot to lock the door at the bottom, and Ted found out, and he was like, never leave the door unlocked again. and again would just leave after saying that, like, so intense, not like a, hey, just a reminder, lock the door. It was always like, never make that mistake again. And I was always like, holy shit, okay, it's fine, I'll lock the door. Totally get it. But rent was cheap, so we continued to live there, and then now we're here. So no more Ted. If I'm dead, you know who did it. You have the name and phone number and address. So help me, guys.
Wow, that was so intense. I didn't know a majority of those details until this literal recording. And now I am so thankful that you do not live there anymore. I'm so grateful that we are here. Holy cow. Sheesh, I need a drink of water.
I hope that was spooky enough for you for this spooky episode. We're hoping to have more spooky stories to tell like this. If you guys like it, if you want a break from it, we'll do our normal podcast. But like, I have fun doing this. So
yeah, tell us what you guys think in the comments below. If you are new here, be sure to like and subscribe. I can't even do this outro. I'm like shaking. I'm like, I'm just so freaked out.
I know.
Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you made it to the end of this episode, congratulations. Mission accomplished. We'll see you next time.
See ya.